guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new Entitled People content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Elderly Neighbor and Serial Trespasser Trying My Patience. I have an older neighbor who's always acted very sharky about our land and the property line. This has been going on for years and years and only gets worse. Back when my grandfather was still alive, may he rest in peace, said neighbor was getting her driveway paved and politely asked if she'd be able to park her cars down at the foot of our yard on our grass. Just for one day and only a few hours while the work was being done. Okay, sure. Some time goes by and we catch her doing it over and over and over again. Eventually end up needing to knock on her door to ask her to repark on her own property. That was a huge pain in the butt, but we finally got her to duck off after multiple warnings. Some time later, she has a landscaping crew over. I'm watching from my deck, smoking a fatty, and notice she instructs the workers that she hired specifically for this, not a routine maintenance crew, to install fixed, permanent, in-ground sprinkler heads in my yard. I had to go down to the end of my property and stop them in the act. Did some brief legal digging, and my state has laws and provisions that say if you can prove you maintained or made improvements on a parcel of land adjacent to yours, there are a few hoops you can jump through to get it. There's red tape involved, but it can be done. Do I want to believe she was just trying to be nice? Yes. Can I? Absolutely not. Personally, I travel a lot for work and live on tour, but from what I can tell, this has only gotten worse. Karen's latest move was to install stepping stones that lead off of her yard, then onto the shared property line, past her shrubs, into my yard. She has been using these stepping stones to invite her pedestrian friends and guests to cut across. She intentionally designed it to have leading lines that make people think that our property is actually hers. She welcomes people to use those stepping stones as a point of egress to then cut through my yard. She's literally just going through life acting like my yard is her own. Oh yeah, I also casually placed my camping/smoking chair in the way of her little stepping stones on my side of the yard, and I observed her trespass into my yard to move it to a different place in my yard, so that her guests could use my yard, without permission, more comfortably. And this old hag has the audacity to approach me while I'm smoking weed at the end of my property and say, "Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Karen. This path is used by dogs, baby buggies, and people. Is that right?" Well, it's not a path. It's my yard. I didn't really feel like I had to enforce it until one of her friends, another neighbor, came up to me in my OWN yard and asked me, "What are you doing?" I don't know, being that I'm on my own property, probably whatever I want. What a stupid question. Not to mention, she's old. What if her stepping stones got wet from her own sprinklers and she slipped, fell in my yard, then tried to sue me? If the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit has taught us anything, it's that we sort of have to expect elderly people to duck things up. I addressed it with her, and she agreed to stop, but I doubt this is the end of this. This has been a ducking campaign. Am I wrong? It's mine, and I just don't want to share it, like at all. Sort. Next one is titled, My ex expected me to give him my car. Quick story about my toxic ex. He barely worked, spent my money, and didn't help for crap at home. A few years into the relationship, my mom gave me her car. She drove it all the way up north, and we got it under my name and I paid for it. It was my first official car, and I was really happy about it. At the time, my ex was bouncing between jobs and didn't have a license, 22 at the time, but too lazy and cheap to apply for a license. I know it's illegal, but in order to keep the money coming in for both of us, I would let him drive my car sometimes to go to interviews or attend work when he did have a job, and sometimes use it to hang out with friends. We also lived together and used the car as our only commute, so I thought it only fair that we split the bills on the car. It was only $80 for insurance and $20 a week for gas, so split in two, it was about $50 a month for each of us. We were together for 5 years, and in that time we did have to fix the car sometimes when we had to replace something, but the car was always mine. When we started fighting a lot, I noticed he'd get mad when I called it my car because he said, since he also pays for it, it's also his. My thought is that yes, we split the bills, but only because he uses it too. Like if a friend constantly needed a ride, I'd def charge for gas money. So essentially he's paying to keep the car up for his use and my use, but it's in my name. Anyways, when we broke up, we had a lot of things to split since we were together for so long. I took our cat since he was moving back in with his mom, and she had an aggressive dog. I would have taken her with me either way because he wouldn't be able to give her the care she needs anyways. I gave him half the deposit for the apartment, even though that was my money, but I didn't want to fight, and let him keep everything material even though he wasn't going to use it, dishes, pots and pans and trinkets. Essentially, I just let him have everything so that I could be rid of him. What we did fight about was when he asked, "So, who's getting the car? I think I should take it since you're moving states." I just stared at him in disbelief. "You're kidding me, right? That's my car. I'm taking it." He blew up. "No, it isn't. I paid for it too. I should have it since your parents can just drive you. You're so selfish." I just sat there. "I'm not arguing with you. It's in my name. You don't even have a license, nor a ducking job. How are you going to pay for it if you could barely even afford to pay your half? You're a game addict. More than 80% of your paychecks were spent on games while I had to struggle to make up for your shortage." The argument went on for like 2 hours until I said that it's mine and that's final. If you try to take it, it'll report it as stolen since it's not in your name. He got hell angry and continued to make passive-aggressive comments until I officially left with my car. Next one is titled, "Old Lady in a Walker Makes Everyone Miserable." She later gets fined. I'm back with another movie theater story. This time, instead of a staff member, the story revolves around one of our semi-regulars. Our regular clientele at the theater was noticeably different from the norm. About 75% of our customers were about 50 and older. Maybe it was the fact that we carried a lot of independent movies. Maybe it was because we were a little cheaper than the mainstream theaters, or maybe it was because the owner was a senior citizen himself, but I digress. As my usual position was that of an usher, I often found myself tending to some of the elderly customers who couldn't get around as easily as some of the others. I understood this was usually happy to assist and would often do so without a complaint. That is except for one old lady in a walker. This lady had to be somewhere in her 80s, and she had this old, worn-out walker that nearly served as a warning that she was approaching, as you could hear it scraping across the concrete before she came into the theater. Subtle enough for the untrained ear to notice, but the very sound possessed the seeds of chaos and discord. Miss Walker, as we shall call her, would always need assistance whenever she came in. You walk her to the auditorium, you had to help her to her seat. If she bought concessions, you had to carry her food. You had to walk her to the restroom when she had to go. And after the movie had ended, you had to call her a cab to get home. It wouldn't be so bad if not for the fact that she was usually barking at you if she felt you weren't doing it the way she felt was the correct way. To this day, I can still hear her saying, "No, you're doing it wrong," in a voice that can only be described as an 80-year-old Patty or Selma from The Simpsons. 9 times out of 10, if I was on a shift when she showed up, I was the one who got stuck helping her because I knew how to assist her, and even then, she would still get snippy. Some incidents that stand out involve one time, she was fussing at me from the moment she walked in the lobby, and continued to do so as I walked her to the restroom, and then to her seat as I carried her food. After that was over, I ended up scaring a few coworkers when I stormed back out into the lobby and proceeded to take out my frustrations on an inflatable punching bag that was promoting the Three Stooges movie, giving you a general time frame of when this took place. Another time, I was trying to get Miss Walker to her seat, but the movie had already started and she was being pretty loud. I was trying to shush her when she bumped her head on the seat in front of her. She didn't even hit it hard enough to leave a bruise, but the way she was acting, you'd think she had given herself a concussion. Needless to say, she didn't want to see her movie and asked us to call her a cab to go home. At least it only meant we had to deal with her for a grand total 15 minutes that day. There was another day after her movie had ended, and she had been in a particularly bad mood. She asked me to call her a cab, and as I'm trying to give the cab company our location, she yelled at me saying, "No, you're doing it wrong. They don't speak English that well. They won't understand." I then heard the cab company say, "Sorry, wrong number," and they hung up on me. Bear in mind, they said the company name when they answered the phone. I had to call back 2 more times and was practically pleading with them before they finally agreed to come get her. She was still fussing the whole time. To make matters worse, I went to go clean the auditorium. I noticed her seat looked wet. A quick whiff confirmed she had peed the seat. This wasn't the last time she did that. Miss Walker lived in an assisted living facility a block away from the theater. One of my coworkers also lived in the facility as she helped to tend for her ailing mother. She told me about how one day around 5 a.m., everyone was forced to evacuate the building when fire alarm went off. As it turned out, Miss Walker had gone downstairs to check her mail and pulled the alarm while waiting for the elevator to take her back up. Her reasoning: the elevator was taking too long and she thought the alarm would make it move faster. Instead, she got stuck with a fine and everyone in the building now hated her. Another old lady from the facility later corroborated the story when I asked her about it. I saw her cringe when I mentioned her name. Sometime before I quit, I noticed she had replaced her old walker for one with wheels that made a lot less noise. I pitied my coworkers since they no longer had a warning for her arrival. Last one is titled, "No Accountability for Workplace Infidelity Between Employees." I found out a former coworker of mine just remarried recently in the past few months and I don't know why, but I am triggered about it. Quick story: about 5 years ago, I started working at a new place of employment and quickly became friendly with some of the other employees. One in particular, we'll call them Twix, told me about how they met their spouse over 15 years before. They both were in other serious relationships with other people, but decided they could no longer be without the other person, so they quickly married each other. In any case, they ended up having several offspring and having a happy life. Twix's spouse was quite active in law enforcement and quite active in the community. Fast forward to just a few years ago, when we all started our jobs at new place of employment. Twix and I hit it off with one another, hanging out with our offspring, etc. Twix would talk about their spouse, and after having met their spouse, it was obvious the spouse was dead gone in love with Twix, even after 15 years of being married. I asked Twix if their spouse could offer some advice regarding a law enforcement matter, and they said no problem. I kept everything strictly professional with Twix's spouse, and they were able to offer pointers on a matter that I needed assistance on. A few weeks after consulting with the spouse, whose advice was very helpful, we got a new coworker. Twix was at first friendly and helpful with this coworker, but it was noticed by the staff that Twix and coworker were obviously cozy with one another. This kept going on for a long time. There was one moment when several of us were sent for training in another city and Twix and the coworker were nowhere to be found. Ironically, Twix's spouse had called me while out of town to give me some updates on the law enforcement issue that I was having. I wasn't sure if I should let them know that I thought their spouse Twix was possibly having an affair because 1. It's not my business. What if they have an open marriage? 2. I didn't want any repercussions at work with these coworkers. I backed off from being close to either coworker since I didn't want to mess with the trash at work with a 10-foot pole. I have no problem being nice and polite to them at work, but I couldn't condone what I knew they were doing, and especially at a workplace training and cheating on their respective spouses. Few months down the road, and it's obvious something is up with Twix and the coworker. They're openly flirting, they're sitting with each other at lunch, the doors to their offices are closed and they keeping going in and out of each other's offices. Even the cleaning crew states something is going on to management, but management brushes it off as Twix has been a very helpful person here and coworker is married to their spouse too, so why would they be dumb and start something at work? A few weeks after, it is incredibly obvious that both of them are sleeping together, not only outside of work but at work. Twix's spouse contacts our work, stating they know something is going on, and they're going to take legal action against their own spouse, against the coworker and our place of employment. Then a few days after that, we have a staff meeting stating that Twix's spouse has passed away from an accident. I'm not sure if I believe that Twix's spouse was in an accident whatsoever. Twix comes back to work after a week or so after their spouse's passing, doesn't seem sad at all, and highly flirty with coworker. Management finally believes the accusations against Twix and the coworker after another fellow employee provides concrete evidence. Management fires the coworker, but refuses to fire Twix because they're grieving. Hearing this news about the spouse passing away made me not only incredibly sad for their offspring, but also the fact that the spouse was helping the community and helping navigate life for some people. It made me angry that there was no accountability for Twix nor really the coworker. The coworker ended up divorcing their spouse too, and then just recently married Twix. I normally am not a judgy person. Seriously, everyone will be judged in the afterlife. If you so believe that way, and who am I to judge? I am nobody. I can't help shake off this feeling that Twix will end up finding a way to off or cheat on this new spouse too, or otherwise benefiting from their former spouse's death and exploiting it somehow. Part of me says, why should I even care? But it just irks me that there's no accountability for this kind of crappy behavior. People get fired all the time for this kind of crap, especially if there's inappropriate behavior at work, and then a subsequent death related to all of that. Thanks for listening.